Hello, my name is Alexia N. Smith, and I'm a licensed therapist, speaker, and mental wellness consultant. I guide individuals, leaders, and organizations to understand mental health in context, not as a personal failure, but as a response to the pressures and the realities that are shaping our lives. And today we're going to talk about one of those areas where that context becomes especially important: the perimenopause and menopause transition, and how it can affect our mental and emotional well-being. I have several objectives that I hope you will walk away with by the end of this workshop. The first being understanding the stages of perimenopause to menopause. Then we'll talk about the hormones that are affected by perimenopause and menopause specifically. We're going to recognize common and not so common physical and mental health symptoms, and we'll explore ways to support your mental well-being, as well as talk about how loved ones can offer you support as well. Finally, we'll learn about tools and community resources to enhance your recovery. But before we start, I want to encourage you to center self-compassion on this topic and as it relates to mental health as a whole. So please accept this grounding statement to start. There is nothing wrong with you, and you don't need fixing. Your body is responding to a natural transition that occurs as a woman ages. This does not make you flawed in any way, regardless of what society or even your own mind might be telling you. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through our time together today. So let's talk about the arc of the perimenopause to menopause journey. Perimenopause is a years-long transitional phase that typically starts in a woman's 40s and is characterized by fluctuating hormones and fewer periods. Now, if you are a woman who does not have periods, you still may experience the effect of the fluctuating hormones even without that period. Perimenopause can last sometimes 4 to 10 years, but experiences vary very widely. And for the most part, however, the onset does tend to start in the late 30s to early 40s. Now, menopause, which comes after perimenopause, signals the end of your menstrual cycle or your ability to conceive a child, with the average age entering menopause being around 51 years old. Now, again, age range of the onset and the physical experiences may vary, but generally it's around 51 years old. So let's talk about some key hormones that tend to shift during menopause. One of the main hormones is estrogen. Estrogen helps regulate mood, memory, and emotional processing. Estrogen also supports serotonin and dopamine, which are brain chemicals that are linked to mood and motivation. Estrogen also influences our sleep and our temperature regulation. So when we're having a hard time sleeping during this time, and when we're getting really hot, a lot of that has to do with our estrogen production. Another key hormone is progesterone. Now, progesterone has calming effects on the nervous system. It supports your sleep and relaxation. And when you have fluctuations in this hormone, it may increase anxiety, irritability, or sleep disturbance. All things are very specific to perimenopause and menopause. Now, what happens during perimenopause and menopause that makes these hormone shifts so substantial? The thing is that these hormone levels do not decline or increase smoothly. They fluctuate significantly during this time. And so these fluctuations can affect your mood, your sleep, your focus, your emotional regulation, and the brain becomes more sensitive to stress during this transition. So this is why it may feel like typical stressors that may have not bothered you in the past are tending to feel more invasive during this time of your life. It's because your brain is more sensitive to stress. So Now that we've talked about the hormones that affect you during perimenopause and menopause, let's talk about the physical and mental symptoms of perimenopause. Now, a lot of these symptoms, if you are going through this stage, are going to be very familiar to you. So just take a deep breath. We know what we're about to talk about, and we'll just go ahead and learn this together. So, first, let's talk about age ranges as we transition. So, late 30s to mid 40s, as we mentioned, is where perimenopause tends to start. And what you'll notice is that your periods may shorten, lengthen, or become more irregular altogether. The PMS symptoms that you might have had might intensify during this time. So, you're looking at more cramps, more clotting, more fatigue, more emotionality, right? This is also where sleep disruptions may begin. So you're going to notice maybe the insomnia, the waking up multiple times at night, hot flashes in the middle of the night, those type of things. And you'll also notice around this time the brain fog or the mood shifts starting to settle in. And as this relates to mental health, this is usually when many women start wondering if they're battling an undiagnosed mental condition. Is this anxiety? Is this depression? Is this ADHD? I personally think there's a lot of overlap with ADHD traits and menopausal symptoms, the focus issues, being easily distracted. But around this time, this is when we notice a lot of the mental and emotional shifts. Now, let's talk about the late 40s and the early 50s. Now, this is where brain fog or forgetfulness becomes much more present. This is when you probably start seeing mood swings or your irritability increasing. And this period of time is what they mainly consider the peak perimenopause time. Periods may even skip months. And this is also where you really start noticing the changes in your weight and your metabolism. And weight and metabolism is where we start to see a lot of increase in distress for a lot of women because things that might have worked for us in the past as it relates to maintaining our body weight, etc., they tend to all stop working here. So now let's talk about 50s and beyond. And this is where we're actually talking about menopause. Menopause is typically reached after 12 months without a period. This is also where you'll notice that your hormone levels might get a little bit lower and then they'll tend to stabilize. However, even though some of your symptoms may improve, others may continue to persist. So we just have to keep that in mind as we continue to go through this process. And let's talk about some maybe not so common menopausal or perimenopausal symptoms. So thinking about physical, a lot of people will report muscle and joint pain. Some people notice itchiness, incontinence, body odor, tingling in different areas of the body, which can be very confusing. You also will notice mental shifts. And again, we've talked about anxiety and depression symptoms, but we might find panic attacks becoming a part of your life, maybe some really significant mood swings, crying spells, etc. And then, of course, there's a sexual element to this. A lot of people who are dealing with menopause and perimenopause might experience uncomfortable sex, vaginal dryness, low libido, all of those type of things, which can really affect their romantic relationships. So these are all other types of symptoms, and the list goes on and on. A big thing I want to mention about perimenopause specifically is that with perimenopause, it tends to be associated with increased risk for anxiety and depressive symptoms, even for those without prior mental health history. So someone who might have always been really focused may find themselves having a hard time staying focused now. Someone who used to be more patient might find themselves lashing out more. Someone who tended to be a lot more sturdy and less emotional might find themselves being so much more emotional now. And this really causes a lot of distress for people, especially when they haven't had these type of symptoms in the past. So why does this catch us off guard? If all women are moving towards perimenopause, why does it catch us off guard? And there's a couple of reasons. And the big reason is because the symptoms typically appear gradually and inconsistently. They just kind of drop in. And the changes may be attributed at the time to just aging. I'm getting older, my body is being weird. You don't necessarily think about it as being connected to hormones. Another thing that makes it a little difficult is that the shifts can feel purely psychological for some people. Well, my mind just seems to be all over the place. And so they think it's a purely psychological issue. And then some people it's mainly physical. Oh, I'm having a lot of pain. And so they'll focus on the physical side of things, not realizing that on both sides it's connected to hormones. Another thing to consider that makes it really difficult and tends to catch us off guard is that medical care may address the symptoms individually rather than holistically. So you find yourself going to a rheumatologist for joint pain, or going to a dietitian for weight loss help, or going to a psychiatrist for anxiety, only to realize that a lot of this is just really a hormonal shift and not individual situations. So this is really something that can really catch us off guard and keep us going in circles trying to figure out what's going on. Another thing that we have to talk about in this is the intersection of race and perimenopause and menopause. Studies have found that Black women tend to enter perimenopause earlier on average, so that late 30s, some women might enter in their early 30s. Black women tend to experience a longer menopause transition, sometimes going past that 10-year mark. They also report more frequent or intense hot flashes and night sweats. And there's also a higher cumulative stress exposure, which can influence your overall health during midlife anyway. But then we have to consider the biological, social, racial factors that will cause us to experience menopause so much differently than other women. Another thing to consider with race is how Black women are disproportionately affected by reproductive. Let me start this over. We'll start this whole slide over. Another thing to consider with the intersection of race and perimenopause is that Black women are disproportionately affected by reproductive health conditions that may cause perimenopause and menopause experiences, such as fibroids. Fibroids tend to affect Black women at rates up to 2 to 3 times higher than white women and often develop more frequently. And PCOS, for example, polycystic ovary syndrome, can influence your hormone balance, menstrual cycles, and metabolic health across the lifespan. So because those symptoms can overlap with menopause-related changes, the experience can sometimes be more complex and harder to identify for Black women. So let's talk about what you're probably feeling, because a lot of this I shared with you, these are things that you've already know, you've researched it, and we're here talking about perimenopause, menopause, and mental health. So let's talk about what this feels like. A lot of women report just being very, very confused. I don't understand what's happening to me. What is going on? I'm not getting answers, right? There's a certain level of frustration that you're probably feeling. You're not getting clear answers on what's going on. You're getting the runaround from your healthcare providers. People in our circles, family, or work environments don't necessarily understand. Sometimes they might feel like we're being dramatic, things of that nature. So, in addition to all those feelings, you're probably feeling isolated. There's probably afraid and angry and disregarded. Ultimately, I believe that the menopause journey, there's a lot of grief in this journey because it's about who you were and who you are becoming. And sometimes who you were and who you are becoming during this period of time feels sort of against your will. And so it can make you feel really, really powerless. So I want to take a moment to speak a little bit more about this grief that I mentioned previously, this grief that can accompany this transition. Because for a lot of women, perimenopause and menopause can bring up a lot of complicated feelings that really resemble grief, right? And grief isn't just when we lose people, grief is also when we lose what we've known. And so there can be grief around the changes that you're seeing and feeling in your body. There can be some grief around shifts in your fertility or your reproductive identity, which can often happen around this time. There can be an overall grief around just the idea of aging, right? There's probably some grief around the life stage that you find yourself in. You might find yourself reflecting on earlier chapters in your life, maybe reflecting on where you actually are at this stage in your life, and it might be bringing up some grief. Grief around even just the loss of energy, maybe the challenges that you're having with health. All of these things are valid and are also a part of the grieving process. So I really want to encourage you, just like with traditional grief, don't force yourself to push through this. Don't force yourself to try to be better. Hold space for yourself. Hold space for yourself in the same way you would hold space for someone else who is grieving. Okay. And I think that this is really important to consider as you're navigating your mental health during this time. Okay. So I want to encourage you in the midst of all of this that you can support yourself through this transition and you will get through this. Just as the women before us and the women after us and the women before them were able to get through this transition. Remember, you are not alone. Okay. So let's talk about how we might navigate this. Now, I want to use a framework that I developed on how to support your mental and emotional wellness regardless of the issue. And that framework is called the CASE framework. And it focuses on 4 areas to sustainable well-being: context, awareness, support, and everyday practices. And we'll go through these one by one so you can see how it might help you navigate your transition into perimenopause and menopause. So first, let's talk about C. C is for context. So the context to remember is that symptoms of menopause and perimenopause come from hormonal transitions, not personal failures or flaws. This is very important to keep in context as you navigate this time. Because if you center that context of what is happening, you might find yourself reducing the self-blame and criticism that many women dealing with perimenopause are dealing with, which can exaggerate your mental health challenges. So this is a priority. This also means acknowledging how shame around your body, changes around aging has been socially constructed as well. And what do I mean by that? Physical health affects mental health. It's something that is just known. Many people who are dealing with chronic physical conditions have situations that affect their emotional well-being. So someone with chronic illness, someone with chronic pain, someone with long-term medical conditions, someone who's dealing with biological transitions from aging, of course, their mental health is going to be affected by those conditions. Their emotional well-being is going to be affected, right? So thinking about that context, if you find yourself feeling like something is wrong with you, take this as a time to challenge how society has contributed to maybe your own internalized ageism, your own internalized ableism, and the bias that might exist for people who have mental health conditions or physical conditions. Because the reality is, regardless of who you are, you're worthy. We are worthy. And you are worthy too in the midst of this transition. So again, keeping that in context. Another thing to keep in context is women's health in general. For much of modern medical history, women were excluded from clinical trials. White male bodies were treated as the default research model. And because of that, research gaps remain. And a lot of time, women's symptoms are often downplayed. And menopause is often just framed as a problem to endure rather than a health transition that needs support. And this is even more specific for Black women because studies show that Black women's symptoms tend to be dismissed or minimized, attributed to stress or emotions, and we're undertreated in medical settings. So again, if it's hard to put this together, don't be hard on yourself. This is what happens when we look at it in context. Okay. So another thing I want you to consider as it relates to looking at this in context is often the very unrealistic and unfair expectations around women and aging. Okay. Because many of us as women, we grow up receiving messages about what we're supposed to be and how we're supposed to age. We hear messages that we're supposed to be able to remain emotionally steady no matter what happens, right? If we become too emotional, then that means that it's a problem. We're taught that we have to continue caring for others without interruption, even working through our own exhaustion, right? So that's an expectation that's often given to us. I think a big one that comes up around this time that we really start considering is this cultural expectation that women are supposed to stay youthful and energetic, and that our bodies are supposed to look the same way, and that we're not supposed to show any signs of aging, right? And a big one too is just the expectation of pushing through our discomfort, pushing through our pain, pushing through our exhaustion. These are expectations that have really been put out into the world. And sometimes we can start to believe it. And if we're believing this, it can make it harder for us to acknowledge when our body needs rest, when we need support. It can really result in us thinking poorly about ourselves and feeling bad about ourselves. So I think it's really important to notice that these are expectations that we might have internalized. And these internalized beliefs can really do a number on our mental health. So I think it's really important to maybe just use this as a time to look at how you can deconstruct these beliefs in your system. Can you look at aging and look at your experience as a woman from a more liberatory space rather than what culture and society has told you? That's another thing to really keep in mind. Now, those are just a few things to consider in context, and this is what we want to consider as we're navigating this change. Now, the letter A, which is in the case framework that comes next, is for awareness. And building awareness and knowledge about how you are personally being affected during this transition can help you feel more empowered to care for and advocate for yourself. Okay. So how might awareness look? So what might awareness look like? A lot of times it's just being self-aware, increasing your self-awareness, being more mindful, increasing your mindfulness, noticing shifts in your body, doing body scanning, checking in with your emotions and your physical health, just really setting aside time to be one with yourself more. And I know that can be very hard in a society that tells us to keep going. We have our responsibilities with our family, our businesses, but this awareness is going to be key. You'll want to start tracking your menstrual cycle, um, counting the hours of sleep you have, any mood fluctuations you might experience, weight changes, energy levels. Try to track all of this because this will help you have an idea of what you're dealing with. Now, you can use journals, the old school writing it down, but apps can be very helpful too. A couple of really helpful apps include the Clue app, CLUE. It tracks menstrual symptoms even if you don't have a period. So that's the really good thing about that app. How We Feel is another app that tracks your mood. And over time, you'll be able to get an idea of when these shifts happen. And being able to have this awareness will also help you understand how symptoms might respond to different treatments, different foods, different exercises. How does the HRT help me now that I've started taking HRT? How is this medication helping me? How is yoga helping me? And these are things you can then take to your care teams as you navigate the healthcare system. Now, the S in case stands for support. Now, support is all about responding to yourself with compassion and seeking the support you need so you can navigate this transition more smoothly. All right. Now, what might support look like? Support starts first with being supportive to yourself. Okay. So, affirming what you are experiencing is going to be really important. Affirm that this is real. Affirm that this is not in your head. Okay. Another way of supporting yourself is allowing space for the grief, frustration, and anger that comes up. And I mean, really allowing space for it. We often swing immediately into trying to fix or change things, which can lead to emotional bypassing, even some self abandonment, because there's a part of you that is having a feeling that might need your attention. So your grief, your frustration, your anger is valid. And what might it look like for you to just allow it to be there, right? What would it look like to tend to it and care for it rather than trying to change it, right? So again, allowing space can do wonders for your mental and emotional health. It might feel difficult in the beginning, but it increases your distress tolerance for those emotions. And then you can respond in healthy ways. Another thing that support might look like for yourself is seeking professional or community support. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Therapists, groups, different type of treatments. Another really big part of support is allowing yourself time to rest. This is so important for us as Black women. Give yourself time to rest, okay? And then another way to support yourself is arming yourself with information, educating yourself. I know a lot of you are doing that. Wonderful. Keep leaning into that. And this is going to be very helpful. And one of the things I might even just offer to you as something to say to yourself in those moments when it feels very hard and you're frustrated and you're not getting the answers that you need, maybe just putting a hand over your heart saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know this is difficult. And I understand why this is so hard for you. Just saying that to yourself. Remember, there is nothing wrong with you. Remember, we said that at the beginning of our time together. You don't need fixing. More than anything, you just need support for this transition. Okay. Another thing that might be helpful as it relates to support is not just supporting yourself, but also getting support from community. Community is an integral part of wellness as a whole, especially for those of us of the Black diaspora. Remember, our shared experiences and community is medicine. All right. So don't forget that. So this means, go to the women in your family, have conversations with the women in your family about their menopause journey. You can join menopause or perimenopause support groups for women who are aging, right? Online communities can be so helpful. There are several online communities on places like Facebook and Reddit for women who are also navigating this journey. And it can be very helpful, especially if you find online communities that are specific to individuals of the Black diaspora. There are educational organizations that you can join, that you can go to events and talks to get more information. And remember, your healthcare professionals are your community too. So talk to your OBGYN, talk to your PCP, talk to your therapist, get a psychiatrist, involve everyone because you deserve that support from your community. All right. Now, how might someone get support from loved ones during this time? And so if you are someone who is maybe supporting someone with perimenopause, or you want to try to help someone to better understand, this is for you. So if you're someone who is supporting someone during this time, it's going to be so important for you to tap into your own empathy. You have to tap into your own empathy because the reality is, if it's hard for you, if you're a family member and you're dealing with all of these shifts in your loved one, if it's hard for you, imagine how hard it is for them, right? So tap into your own empathy. Practice more patience. Okay. Yes, she forgot. Yes, she didn't remember, right? Yes, it's freezing in the house. Yes, we know all of this. And I know it can be frustrating, but try to practice that patience and remember, tap into that empathy for that person, the same empathy that you would give anyone else. Try to listen. Try to listen without judgment. Be a safe space. Sometimes it's just about listening and not trying to fix, okay? Maybe it's just holding space. Believing her when she's telling you about these symptoms. Believe that these are real symptoms and that they are really affecting her. There might be little things that you can do around accommodations or adjustments if you have the capacity. If she's visiting or if she comes around, consider the temperature in your home. Keep a fan or a towel in reach. Keep some ice water nearby. Make sure seating is comfortable, especially if she's dealing with a lot of pain, right? These are all things that can really go a long way. And again, consider this as a learning opportunity, again, to be a better ally to people dealing with health issues. This is a perfect opportunity to practice being an ally, right? And I think it's really important for you to also know, if you're supporting someone with perimenopause or menopause, don't neglect your own self-care too. Make sure that you're taking care of your own self-care. So the final step in the case framework is E, and E stands for everyday practices. It's very important to remember that your wellness is not a one-time event. It comes from repetition. It comes from discipline. I always tell my clients that you don't learn to shoot a free throw just doing it once a day or one time during the week. It's repetition, practice, and discipline. So my question for you are, what are the everyday practices that can help you better navigate this shift? So let's just talk about a few. And a lot of these things are really important for your well-being overall, but it becomes especially important as we start to age and go through this transition, okay? So what my everyday practices look like. Prioritizing ways to reduce your symptoms is huge. We have to prioritize ways to get through these symptoms. And so one of those things is focusing on your sleep hygiene. This is important regardless of whether you're perimenopausal or not. So are you making sure to keep your phone out of the bedroom? Are you turning on the fan and the AC? Do you have some calming music or sounds in the background? Are you doing a lot of busy stuff before sleep? These are things that you have to think about when you think about sleep hygiene. Really focus on that. Okay. Another thing that can be helpful is paying attention to what you eat. Diet and food changes, reducing inflammatory foods, reducing foods that you notice make you feel bad based on how you've been tracking your symptoms, right? So noticing that. Exercise always helps with mental health challenges. But of course, with exercise and the body changes, be gentle with yourself. Change your routine if you need to, depending on pain, depending on whatever's happening. Just be fluid and be open to how you're evolving with this. You might not be able to do the same exercises and things that you used to do. Another thing is mindfulness. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Mindfulness, meditation, spiritual practices. Again, these things are so important for our mental health, and it becomes even more important when we get to this transition. So making sure you set that time aside for deep breathing, for yoga, for your spiritual practices, things that fill you up. So as you're navigating the mental health challenges, you feel more supported and resourced, right? You can do more reflecting. You can do journaling, nervous system regulation. There are all kinds of things that you can do to increase your mindfulness. And of course, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is doing more supplements, doing more self care. You might need more rest. You might need to take some herbs, massages. Of course, you want to check in with your healthcare professionals before doing anything. But a lot of women have found that this can be very helpful. And I know what some of you are going to say, oh, these are things I want to do, but I have brain fog. How do I keep up with this? If focus is difficult, see if you can find some ways to integrate productivity apps. Finch is an amazing productivity app that you can use to make sure that you check up all of your everyday practices. Insight Timer and Calm can help with the meditation. And another thing, community helps. What other women or individuals in your community or even in your family can benefit from better sleep hygiene or could benefit from exercise? Include them. We go further together. Now, I know I just talked about a lot of practices, and I know some of you might be thinking, okay, I got kids, I have family, I have work, I'm running a business. This is a lot of stuff to start adding on, right? And, I'd like to invite you to consider perimenopause and menopause doing actually something a little different. Maybe consider that this time is revealing where our lives may have already become unsustainable. Maybe it's telling us something. Maybe it's forcing us to listen to our bodies in a different way, right? So this might mean you might have been the person who kept pushing through your burnout. You might have been the person who kept taking more hours or taking on more responsibility. Maybe your body is telling you that you need more rest now, right? Maybe you were the type who took on a lot of work, who was a caregiver. Maybe this means that you need to set some new boundaries around your work life, some more boundaries around caregiving, asking for more support, requiring more support in the things that you have to get done, right? Setting those boundaries, even prioritizing your health in new ways. Maybe you were the type who felt like, okay, I'm not going to the gym because I have so much to do, or, oh, I'm not going to cook any meals because it's just easier to get this, get something from a fast food restaurant. And maybe this time is saying, actually, no, this is your body, and I'm telling you that I need you to prioritize your health in a different way, right? And I want you to just take a moment to notice if do you notice any resistance to what I'm saying, right? And if you are, I invite you to reflect on a couple of things. What is the source of this resistance? Especially if you know that your body can benefit from this. What is the resistance? Another question to consider is, when did you learn that you have to push through what your body tells you? Was this something that was taught to you in your childhood? Is this something that society tells you? And another bigger question is just like, what are you afraid of happening if you do make those changes in your life? At best, things will get better. That it'll maybe feel better for you to navigate this period of time in your life. So again, listen to what your body is telling you. This might be an opportunity to really create some sustainability in a life that was already unsustainable. Now, I do want to name as well that if it feels like too much, just remember to honor that. Honor that and take rest when you need to, okay? Because all of this can feel overwhelming. And again, I am going to remind you that there is nothing wrong with you and you make sense. This is a hard time, okay? So, as we're starting to come to a close, let's start talking about tools and resources for this journey. Now, I want to name that a lot of these resources and tools I'm going to offer are for educational purposes only, and they're not medical advice. So, please make sure that you consult a qualified healthcare provider for guidance on your specific health needs, but we can just talk about a few. So the first thing I definitely want to again lean into is community and educational resources. Connecting with others can help reduce isolation and help normalize the menopause transition. You would be surprised that there are a lot of groups and things that are going on that bring women together around this issue. A couple of websites to consider. Let's Talk Menopause. Again, it's let's talk menopause.org. That's a great website that has a lot of resources as well as groups to join. menopausemademodern.com is another website that includes information, includes groups, and other resources to help you navigate this transition. Another organization called the North American Menopause Society, also known as NAMS, is a really good program. They provide evidence-based menopause education, but there's also a provider directory. So if you find yourself having having difficulties with the providers that are helping you, you can go on this website and perhaps find some other providers who are more helpful. And there are a lot of things that are out in the media. A really good media show around menopause is called an Oprah Winfrey Special, The Menopause Revolution. This is on Disney, and it's about an hour-long program that really gets into deep conversations, talking to other women who are dealing with menopause, and it also offers so many resources. And of course, don't forget, social media and YouTube can also be helpful. So use your hashtags, do a Google search, and there are plenty of content creators that are covering this topic. So again, community and educational resources are very helpful. Now let's talk about a couple of supplements or nutritional support. And again, remember to talk to your healthcare provider first before trying any of these. But some of these you might already know about. So of course we have magnesium, and magnesium tends to help support with sleep and nervous system regulation. And so this can really help you with those sleep disturbances. Another thing is omega-3 fatty acids. Now, omega-3 fatty acids can really help support your mood as well as your heart health. And then we also have vitamins such as vitamin D and calcium, which can be very important for bone health because believe it or not, when women enter perimenopause and menopause, some find that their bone health diminishes as well, as if there wasn't enough things going on. Then we have black cohosh and evening primrose oil. Now, those are things that can be really helpful for those really invasive hot flashes. But again, the research findings for these things might vary. So do your own research, try it out, see what happens. Another thing to consider is medical support options. Again, going to your OBGYN or your PCP to get started, okay? One option that so many women hear about is hormone replacement therapy, which is HRT. They also call it menopausal hormone therapy. Now, HRT in the beginning, there were some concerns about it not being supported, but very recently in the media, it has been found that HRT has really been supportive for women. And it basically replaces the hormones that decline during menopause. So a lot of women might find that they see improvements in those hot flashes and night sweats, the sleep disruptions that they're dealing with, the vaginal dryness, the mood changes, and the brain fog. So again, talk to your OBGYN or your PCP to see if they can get you started. Another thing to consider are alternative therapies. These are things that you might not think immediately that would support with perimenopause, but it does. And so acupuncture and acupressure, for example, acupuncture has been found to help with your mood, your sleep, as well as pain. And the wonderful thing about acupuncture is often covered by your insurance. So don't be afraid to check out some acupuncture to help with some of your symptoms. We all know the benefits of yoga and how that can help with our well-being. And then another alternative therapy that some people have found some good results from is even hypnosis. Of course, you want to do your research, find vetted providers who can provide this to you, but even that has been found to be helpful for some of those symptoms. So, in closing, I know we covered a lot, and I just want to again remind you that menopause and perimenopause are really significant life transitions. And with any life transition, it's going to affect your body, your mind, and emotional well being. So you have to give yourself grace during this time. And I want you to always remember to understand that this is a part of aging. In a way, it's a gift of aging. It's the proof that you have been here. So understand that these experiences make sense, put them in context, and hopefully that will help you move away from any type of self blame to much more compassion and care for yourself. So remember, the case model says, remember the context. Understand the context of what your body and your life circumstances are navigating during this time. Awareness, notice how these changes are affecting your mood, your energy, and your well being. Get support. Be compassionate towards yourself, get support for yourself, and get support from others. And remember those everyday practices, those sustainable habits that support your health over time. Again, nothing about this transition means something is wrong with you. Remember, you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. You will get through this just like the women before us did. Remember, you are powerful, you are worthy, and you are enough. I hope that this has been very helpful. Please keep in touch and good luck.